Survivors in the Frozen North, a story by Beverly Randall and illustrations by Julian Brew. "3 months old. Far away in the north of the world, Comet the polar bear poked his nose out of the tunnel in the snow. The tunnel led to the cramped winter den where he had been born 3 months ago. Now, for the first time in his life, Comet felt the sun on his face and the wind in his fur. His twin sister, Sharni, pushed him from behind. The two cubs skidded down the slope towards their mother, Telek. She had clawed her way out of the den a few minutes earlier. For a while, the cubs enjoyed tumbling about in the snow, but soon they were tired out, and their mother led them back to the shelter of the den where she suckled them. Telek was very thin. She had eaten nothing for 5 whole months. If she did not find food soon, all 3 of them would die. A day or 2 later, Telek decided that her cubs were strong enough to walk to the frozen sea. There she would hunt for seals, but Comet and Sharni had short legs, and it was difficult for them to cross to the icy ridges. Although Telek was starving, she had to keep stopping to let her tired cubs feed and rest. Her body sheltered them from the freezing wind. After walking for several days, Telek stopped and lifted her nose in the air. She could smell seals. At last, she reached the hunting grounds. Telek soon made her first kill. Now she would not starve to death, and she would be able to go on feeding her cubs. Down by the frozen sea, Comet and Sharni were well fed, but the world was still full of danger. One day they walked along. Telek saw a large male bear approaching. She knew that he might try attack her cubs and eat them. Telek was smaller than the male bear, but she growled so fiercely that he decided not to risk a fight. He turned back and left the cubs alone. This time the twins had survived, but Telek was still nervous. She took no chances and hurried them away. 6 months old. 3 months later, the cubs were still too small to hunt for their own food. Every day they followed Telek and learned new skills. Sometimes she would sit beside a seal's breathing hole, waiting for a seal to come back from catching fish beneath the ice. When the seal put its head above the water to take a breath, Telek would swipe at it with her huge paw. But the seals were quick and wary and would often escape. Then she would have to try again. Comet and Sharni loved to play fight. Once Telek was waiting silently by a breathing hole. The cubs scuffled with each other. The seal heard them and saw their moving shadows and was scared away. Telek was cross, and she turned around and cuffed Comet and Sharni with her large paw. After that lesson, the cubs knew that they must keep quiet and still while their mother was hunting. Late in the summer, the thick sea ice began to melt. One day Telek crossed some open water between floating islands of ice. Comet and Sharni, whose paws were smaller, paddled along slowly behind her. They were enjoying their first real swim. But not for long. A pod of fierce killer whales saw them and gave them a chase. Telek knew that she had to reach safety of a large ice foe, but she couldn't leave her cubs behind. In a great hurry, she got Comet to climb onto her back, and then Sharni clinging to her fur. Telek swam for her life. Telek and her cubs scrambled out of the water just in time. Then they raced away from the edge of the ice, well out of reach of the leaping whales. Telek had saved her cubs from terrible danger once again. 2 years old. Telek took care of her cubs for more than 2 years. During all that time, she fed them and sheltered them and protected them from danger. Comet and Sharni grew to nearly be as big as their mother, but they did not want to leave her. They knew that she would allow them to share all the food that she caught. But one morning, Telek left her cubs because she knew that they were big enough to hunt for their own food. She had taught them well, and all they needed was practice. At first, the cubs wandered about expecting Telek to come back, but a day later, she had still not returned. The twins were now on their own. They felt lonely and hungry. As the weeks went by, they grew even hungrier. A dead seabird was the only thing they found to eat. They tried to catch seals at their breathing holes, but the seals were too quick for them. Talek had shown her cubs how to hunt, but they were finding it difficult. They were getting desperate. Caman and Charney could not survive much longer without food. At last, Caman saw a seal resting on the ice, with its back to the water. Now he had a chance. He would sneak up behind it. Caman lowered himself into the sea without making a noisy splash. With great care, he swam towards the seal until he was very close to it. He sprang out to the water and killed the seal before it had time to escape. Charney hurried to join Caman, and together they shared a good meal for the first time since their mother had left. A few days later, all by herself, Charney managed to catch a seal at its breathing hole. She shared it with her brother. Caman and Charney had finally learned to take care of themselves. Now they could survive alone in the dangerous frozen world.